Good afternoon, everyone. This is Londa Dewey, and I am the president of the QTI Group. I can't thank you enough for joining us during your lunch hour today to talk about 2020 HR trends. We have clients and friends throughout the state of Wisconsin joining us today, so again, thank you. As most of you know, at QTI, our business is people, and our focus is helping organizations reach their full potential through people, and we do that through many ways. One is through our temporary staffing services. Secondly, it's through our professional and executive recruiting services. Third, it's through our total rewards and engagement consulting services. And finally, fourth, it's through our PEO and HR consulting services and capabilities. So with all of that in mind, we've really taken some time to take a step back and think about what our clients are thinking about as they develop their 2020 HR plans and HR strategies. We've done a survey for the last 10 years, and in each of the last few years, the top HR talent has been around attracting talent. The top challenge has been attracting talent. And so with that in mind, we wanted to ask a lot more questions about talent trends so that we could take the data from Wisconsin companies and form actionable strategies for you as you develop your 2020 plans. So I'm really excited today to introduce you to Summer Rector. Summer is the Chief Operating Officer of QTI Consulting. She is going to share the survey data, insights, and recommendations. Tara Conger, who's our Chief Operating Officer of QTI HR, has been really helpful with Summer in putting these slides together. She's not able to join us today, so Summer's going to carry the presentation and share all the information with you. Today, after the presentation, you will receive a follow-up email from QTI, and that will give you access to our ebook with a lot of great data in it. In addition to that, it'll give you directions in terms of how to ask questions if you have any questions on today's webinar. So once again, thank you so much for joining us, and it's my pleasure to introduce you to Summer Rector. Summer?
Thank you very much, Londa, and thank you to all of you on the phone for joining us for this wonderful conversation that we're going to have today. So just to set the stage, we wanted to talk a bit about today's business landscape, which we know is filled with constant change and increasing competition. We're seeing demographic and workforce transformations, including what results as talent shortages like we've never seen before. We're seeing reinvention of industry and business models, growing social activism, exponential changes in technology, just to name a few. Even the way that we are defining businesses is changing. So recently, a few months ago, the Business Roundtable, or the CEOs of 200 of the world's largest organizations, so think Apple, think Amazon, think Google, made a commitment to redefining what it means to be a business, where it's no longer about maximizing shareholder return, it's about maximizing stakeholder return. So the world in which we work is constantly evolving. And we see that carries through into our HR landscape, where talent attraction and retention are critical. Just to highlight a few of the key trends that we're seeing in terms of workforce statistics, in Wisconsin, we know that unemployment is low. It's low nationally, for sure. It's at 3.7%, the U.S. average unemployment rate. But here in Wisconsin, we're facing it worse than some of our other states in the country. We're seeing unemployment levels at 3.1%, which is record low levels for us. Additionally, we know that productivity takes time. So as we look around at how long it takes the average employee to become proficient in their role, it takes about 2 or more years. So it takes a long time to ramp employees up to be proficient in their jobs. Further, we know that the risk of turnover is real. We know, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, that the median U.S. employee tenure is 4.2 years. So what does that mean? Well, to me, it means that we spend about 2 years ramping employees up to become proficient and productive in their roles, and then we've got about another 2.2 years to have them at that functioning at that level before we may potentially risk losing them. Additionally, we know that turnover is costly. So research shows that turnover costs at least 33% or more of annual base pay levels. When you think about the lost productivity, the cost to recruit and replace that role, as well as any additional pay increases that may be necessary to bring in new talent. So in all of this, the talent attraction and retention are critical. So that brings us to QTI's 2020 HR Trends Survey. As Londa mentioned, we know that it is challenging for employers right now, and in order to succeed, they need data to inform HR strategies. And so we've overhauled this survey that we've been doing for about a decade now to be more impactful as you're thinking about, strategies that you would like to implement at your organization to help you succeed as you go into 2020. A few highlights of participating organizations in our survey: we had about 207 participants, primarily Wisconsin-based companies, most of which were privately held, although we surveyed organizations of all ownership statuses. Industries of participants varied. About a third were from finance banking and about a quarter from manufacturing. Professional and business services was the third largest industry to participate in the survey. And most employers had between 10 to 250 employees, although we surveyed employers of all sizes. The survey closed in early September, so this is fresh information for you to take into your 2020 HR strategic planning process. So as we're going through the survey, we're going to highlight not only the top challenges we saw, but also strategies to overcome those challenges. So what were the top challenges? Well, as Londa mentioned earlier, the top challenge continues to be attracting the right talent, which is faced by 91% of organizations that we surveyed. We also saw that the second highest challenge is meeting higher compensation demands, faced by 83% of surveyed organizations. This was about number 6 or 7 most significant challenge in last year's survey, and as you can see, that's risen toward the top here in this year's survey. Additionally, the third most critical challenge facing employers is improving leadership development, faced by 82% of respondents. Now, it might be a little hard to read the chart that's on the right that summarizes the top challenges faced by employers. So I'll read to you the 4th and 5th most significant challenge. But before I do, I want to make reference to what Londa mentioned earlier in the call, which is that we will follow up with copies of the 2020 HR Trends Report, which will provide more details on the charts that you're going to see or the data that you'll see summarized in today's presentation. So the 4th highest challenge is building a sustainable workforce through succession planning, and the 5th is training and developing the workforce. Now, why I call attention to those 2 items is that they tie back to the 3rd highest challenge, which is related to development. So talent development in this environment is critical, especially as we know that there is a talent shortage, as well as then a skills gap that is continuing to widen. So how are employers overcoming these challenges? Well, we dove into that question from 5 different perspectives. First is talent attraction, followed by talent retention and engagement. Then we looked at things from a total rewards perspective. So total rewards is thinking about compensation, benefits, as well as the intangibles that you offer through your employment experience. We also explore diversity and inclusion as well as talent management. And what I mean by talent management is thinking about talent development. So how are employees being developed at your organization, as well as performance management, as well as people analytics. So let's dive in to the strategies that we uncovered in terms of how organizations that are succeeding are rising above. The first strategy is employment brand, which we found to be the key to attracting and retaining top talent. So what is an employment brand? Well, an employment brand is the market perception of what it's like to work for an organization. In other words, it's the image that your prospective, current, and past employees have in their minds about the employment experience at your organization. And in this day and age, we have the social media platforms, the technology, for anyone who has an opinion about your employment brand to share it at a broad level. And what's important to highlight in this definition is that it's not about what you think, it's about what others think. So it's really important that you are investing that time and those resources in actively and proactively managing your employment brand. So a question for you to think about is, who is managing your employment brand within your organization? And when was the last time that you evaluated it? I encourage you to think about if you were to invest even a fraction of the resources that you invest in managing your company brand from a product or service standpoint, if you were to invest just a fraction of those resources into managing your employment brand, what good it might do. So how can you manage your employment brand? Well, I encourage you to do the research. So look externally at what is being said about your organization. Look on LinkedIn, look on Glassdoor, look at what comments are being posted. If there's anything that's being posted that you disagree with, I encourage you to post a response that acknowledges and thanks the respondent for sharing that information with you. That's going to help your organization to look positively in response to what could be some negative feedback. But what it says is that you are willing to receive that feedback and then take action to try to overcome it to the extent possible. So encourage those who may post those types of comments to connect privately with you to further discuss and understand the situation, and really try to proactively own the message that is being told out there through sharing additional posts through social media that highlights some of the positives of your employment brand. I also encourage you to do the research internally. Do employee engagement interviews or surveys. Do interviews with employees to understand why they stay with their organization and what motivates them. Study your exit interview data. Learn what's getting in people's way, and then try to overcome those types of challenges. So in terms of, what are people talking about from an employment brand standpoint? In our survey, we found that the top things that organizations are talking about are benefits, as well as organization culture and values. And these have been the top things that are being discussed for a number of years now. In this environment, though, I challenge you, I feel strongly that these are table stakes of what it means to be a good employer. You have to offer competitive benefits. You need to have a positive organization culture and strong values. Those are table stakes in the current employment landscape we're facing. Another way to approach what to highlight from an employment brand standpoint is to think about what employers aren't talking about. So the three least discussed or highlighted elements from an employment brand standpoint we found to be unique rewards and recognition programs, such as tickets to games, performances, paid sabbaticals, social media breaks, those types of things, as well as diversity and inclusion, as well as workplace facilities. So think of a cafe, an on-site daycare, recreational space, free parking, those types of things. These differentiators could be your proof points when it comes to talking about your organization culture. So for example, if you want to highlight that you have a collaborative culture, rather than just saying that, prove it. Think about how you may highlight recognition programs that reward for teams for collaborating. Think about how you are committed to diversity and inclusion because you want to foster an environment where employees feel safe to collaborate with others and share their ideas. And think about if you have an open work environment so that you can provide greater opportunities for employees to collaborate as they're working day to day. These types of items are going to help you to better showcase your employment brand as you're out there in the market. And I also encourage you to think about, from an applicant perspective, what is it that applicants might be saying, or what is it that you want to convey to them as they're coming into your organization, whether or not they're given a job opportunity. So an example would be Johnsonville Sausage is one that they give candidates who interview with them a $5 gift card after each interview that says, "Thanks for letting us grill you." These types of things say a lot about your employment brand. Another example here at QTI, we are committed to corporate social responsibility. So in our interview process, we talk a lot about the fact that we offer 2 paid volunteer days and that we are very involved in the community through nonprofit work, as well as the fact that we internally actually have a nonprofit that sits beneath QTI to support employees affiliated with QTI. So we talk about these things because that is a critical area that's a focus to us. And what's important is to pick the things that differentiate you, and remember that you can't be everything to everyone. So what is the one thing that you are going to focus in on when it comes to your employment brand? Stay interviews is another critical HR strategy that we're seeing successful employers adopt if they haven't already. And the reason being is that retention strategy starts with why. Our survey found that there's a need to shift from reactive to proactive strategies. On average, across survey respondents, we saw voluntary turnover rates of 12.1%. And of course, this varies by industry. More of that information is shared in the ebook that you'll receive following the webinar. The top reasons that were cited for resignation were 1, career development, cited by 50% of employers, 2, compensation, cited by 41%, and then 3 is retirement, cited by 38%. Now, there's not much that we can do about retirement, but career development and compensation, those are things that we can try to address. And as we're thinking about this need to shift from reactive to proactive strategies, just to further elaborate a bit on that topic, some employers we know do retention bonuses as a way to try to retain employees who've expressed disinterest in staying with the organization as they're entertaining other offers. So some organizations may offer a retention bonus as a tool to try to keep that employee longer. Now, in the decade or so that I've been in the world of total rewards, I've seen a lot of those along the way, and I've also heard a lot of feedback about how those types of strategies may not be successful long term. And so I encourage you to think about more proactive types of strategies. So what's an example of that? Well, stay interviews are a wonderful example of a proactive strategy, which is seeking to understand in order to maximize employee retention. For those who aren't familiar, a stay interview is a structured discussion that a leader proactively conducts with an employee to learn how to strengthen that employee's engagement and retention with the company. So it's asking vulnerable questions like, when was the last time that you thought about leaving the organization and why? As you're commuting into work each day, what is it that you look forward to? What is it that gets in your way? It's taking that feedback gathered from those stay interviews, which I encourage you to conduct on a regular basis, and putting it into action. So while 72% of employers identified in our survey that retaining key talent is a concern, only 24% are regularly performing these stay interviews. I encourage you to ask employees for this feedback before it gets to be too late, before they think about leaving. Ask them for that input and then take action on things that may be getting in their way so that you can overcome those challenges before they get to be too big of a concern. One thing I want to point out as we're going through these strategies today is that some of these may not be new concepts, but what our survey found is that they are worthwhile strategies to pursue. And a lot of employers, while well-intentioned, may not be focusing their time right now on these strategies. Stay interviews is a great example of that. It's something that it's been around for a few years, but we're still not seeing employers regularly conducting them in mass quantities. And so it's something that we strongly encourage you to consider doing as you're seeking to maximize retention within your organization. So managing payroll spend, this is getting into the retention, engagement, as well as total rewards topics. And it's no surprise, as the number 2 concern or challenge faced by employers is the rising compensation demands. And what our study found is that it pays to retain and engage, and we'll talk more about that in a minute here. So, fun fact, 78% of the employers that we surveyed believe that employees are paid fairly. Not so fun fact, only 22% of employees believe they're paid fairly. Now, this may come as no surprise, but what is alarming is that there is a 56% gap when you compare these two results between employers and employees' perception of fair pay. And so what's important is that we are trying to course correct that viewpoint. It's not to say that 22% of employees are paid fairly, it's to say that they believe they're paid fairly, and that perception is important. And so trying to manage that perception through communication is going to be a critical strategy to consider, and we'll talk more about that coming up. Now, our survey found that payroll spend may be outpacing pay increase budgets as employers are challenged to meet pay demands. So looking at the figure on the left, we are highlighting that the median actual and projected pay increase budget is still at 3%. We've been seeing that for a number of years in a row now. It continues to be the norm that's being budgeted by employers. That said, our survey found that on average, year-over-year payroll spend is increasing by 7.3%. So how can that be? Well, it's increasing through off-cycle pay adjustments. So say, for example, you need to adjust employee pay in order to better meet market, to retain that employee. That adjustment may occur outside of the annual increase process. Additionally, if there's promotions that are occurring, or if you're needing to backfill a role, these types of changes may drive up payroll spend outside of that typical annual increase process. Now, what's also interesting that our survey found is that there is a strong correlation between voluntary turnover and employee engagement in managing payroll spend. So talking about voluntary turnover to start with. Employers with a 3% or more increase in turnover saw an average year-over-year payroll increase of 4.5% more than employers with a 3% or more decrease in turnover. So what does this mean? It means that those with high turnover are seeing higher year-over-year payroll increases than those with low turnover. Additionally, employers with low engagement saw an average year-over-year payroll increase of 2.8% more than employers with high engagement. In other words, if you want to manage payroll increases, it really pays to have high engagement levels and then low voluntary turnover levels. The next strategy we dove into was focused around total rewards philosophy. And those that are doing well are focused on looking outwardly, inwardly, and holistically. And before we carry into this topic further, I want to take a pause to make sure everyone's aware of what we're talking about when we say total rewards philosophy. So total rewards philosophy is your organization's why behind your total rewards program. So what are all the elements of your total rewards program? Why do you invest in those vehicles? What is the role that they serve? Who are you competing with for talent? All of those questions are documented within your total rewards philosophy. So, as I mentioned, successful total rewards philosophies are measuring outwardly by evaluating the marketplace, they're assessing inwardly by surveying employee motivators, and they're thinking holistically by building and communicating a total rewards program. Let's dive into each one of these three topics in the next few slides. From measuring outwardly, employers that are looking externally to the market, they're trying to meet the market in compensation and benefits. It's not that the majority are trying to lead, the majority are trying to just meet the market in comp and benefits. What they are trying to lead in, however, is intangibles. So when we talk about intangibles, we're thinking about all of those pieces that are harder to put a dollar value to. So for example, career development opportunities that might be offered within your organization, as well as the quality of leadership within your organization, the quality of the workplace environment that you have, workplace flexibility. Those types of programs that are harder to place a dollar value on are critical in this environment and something to proactively manage as well. Now, employers are regularly evaluating the market to use and using reliable data. In fact, 74% of employers rely on market survey data. And those employers, 50% are completing a market compensation study on an annual basis. And it's no surprise with the second highest HR challenge being managing compensation demands. And so employers are regularly looking at that market information, be it internally or through external relationships, in order to stay informed on how compensation levels are changing. And some of them are making adjustments multiple times a year just to continue to keep up with the market. Next, they're assessing inwardly. So we encourage you to do this by actually surveying employees to understand their motivators. Don't make assumptions. So how can you do this? Well, you can do a survey yourself or partner with another organization to do this type of survey where you're uncovering what is motivating employees. So for example, you might ask them questions like, would you rather have a 1% increase in base pay or a 2% increase in 401k match? By pitting those scenarios against each other, you're better able to understand what it is that employees are motivated by and value. I think about an organization I know that recently rolled out pet insurance. And they were really excited about the rollout, and then very surprised when only a handful of folks, if even that, elected that offering, because they just thought it was going to take off like like a wildfire. And so if that employer had actually surveyed employees to understand motivators rather than making an assumption, they would have avoided that lost time and resources invested in rolling out that type of benefit offering. Now, Monster recently did a study in their Gen Z workforce report where they shared perspectives on top work motivators based on the employees that they had surveyed out in the country. And they identified some top motivators that vary across generations, be it boomers, Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z. And there's additional research like this that is interesting information that's out there. I encourage you, though, don't assume that this is the case for all of the folks that work at your organization that fit within these demographics. Actually ask your employees what it is that motivates them. Don't make assumptions. And the third component of a total rewards philosophy that we're seeing successful organizations do is thinking holistically. And they're doing that by thinking about total rewards as a full package, because there's so much more than just pay. From an employer perspective, we're commonly focusing on the cost of different programs. Starting on the left hand of the side, we're thinking about pay. So cash compensation vehicles such as base pay, short-term incentives, long-term incentives. We're also thinking about benefits, retirement, savings, medical, different types of insurances. Those are higher cost elements of the total rewards package, and it's important to be competitive in those elements in this environment. What we often don't talk much about or proactively manage is the additional elements that I referred to earlier as intangibles. So these are things like careers and work life. And so I encourage you to think about, from a careers perspective, what career opportunities might you offer within your organization? What development opportunities? Do you provide equitable access? Is that something that's important to your organization? From a work-life standpoint, what time off programs do you support? Wellness programs? These additional types of offerings are important to consider, especially as we're trying to recognize the whole employee that's coming to work each day. Now, what's important to note about this visual is that each one of these elements from an employer perspective translate into an employee perspective. So from a pay, we're thinking about my value today. Benefits translates to my financial security. Careers translates to my future value. And work life translates to my quality of life. So I will pause here and ask you, which of these is more important? And it's a trick question because they're all important. So if you're not already, I encourage you to be regularly communicating with employees about these total rewards package offerings that you provide. So if you're not doing total rewards statements, at least on an annual basis, I encourage you to consider doing that. Total rewards statements summarize all the offerings, including the intangibles that you offer through your employment experience. And that can be a great thing to share with employees through an in-person conversation with the manager, and perhaps time it with when you're doing your annual pay increases. I encourage you as well to accompany those total reward statements with a thank you letter from the leadership at your organization that recognizes the employees' contributions and thanks them for their commitment to helping the organization. And the other thing I'll encourage as it relates to total reward statements is to think about mailing those statements to employees' homes so that they can be shared with families. I know of employees who have received these statements who've cried out of pride after receiving them because they were so honored and excited about being able to share this with their families. So I encourage you already to think about doing those types of things if you're not already. Another organization that we partner with provides regular blog postings. This organization does it on a weekly basis, but even if you were to think about doing it on a monthly basis, but essentially within the blog that goes out on the intranet page of the organization, they're highlighting different aspects of their total rewards program in action. So for example, they might showcase an employee that recently used their paid volunteer time off and how that employee appreciated that vehicle, as well as the impact that the employee was able to have through that volunteer opportunity. Those types of postings or communications, however you may manifest them within your organization, are great reminders, especially as we know employees often fixate more so on their cash compensation rather than some of the benefits or intangible offerings that you may provide through your employment experience. The next strategy is focused on pay transparency, because a fair and transparent pay process increases employee engagement. So let's talk a little bit more around total rewards communication. So I talked about what a total rewards philosophy is earlier in our conversation, and 83% of employers that we surveyed have a documented total rewards philosophy, which is excellent. And ideally in time, I'd love to see that figure approach 100%, as it's a really great way to make sure that you are maximizing the return on your total rewards investment, which, as a fun fact I'll share, on average across organizations tends to be about 70% of operating expenses. So if you want to talk about, an investment to make sure you're maximizing, it's your total rewards investment. Now, while 83% of employers have a documented philosophy, only 25% are regularly communicating their philosophy with employees. So I encourage you, if you have a philosophy documented, think about when was the last time that you shared that or made that accessible to employees. But beyond that, when was the last time that you talked about it with employees? So here at QTI, we post our total rewards philosophy on our intranet page, and then at regular manager and above meetings we refer to as our leadership council, we're talking about our total rewards philosophy. What are the different elements of our program? Why do we have those elements? And not only do we talk about them with employees, but we also talk about our total rewards program and philosophy externally with candidates. We do this through a total rewards one-pager that highlights the different facets of total rewards that we offer through our employment experience. And that's something that as candidates go to our About QTI page to learn more about career opportunities, they might be able to get a perspective on there. So I encourage you to think about doing something similar with your organization. So not only communicating with employees, but then thinking about too, how can you communicate more effectively with candidates as well. Now, what's important to know is that a fair and transparent pay process is actually going to boost employee engagement more than additional pay. And this is thanks to research that was done recently by PayScale through a study of over 7,000 employers. They found that, because it's so important, I'll repeat it one more time, a fair and transparent pay process boosts employee engagement more than additional pay. In other words, if you help employees, think to an iceberg analogy. What's above the surface is the what I'm paid, what I'm told. What's beneath the surface is how and why pay decisions are made the way they are. And that's the bigger part of the iceberg, right? And that's the more interesting part. So if you help employees to better understand the how and why behind pay decisions, you're going to see higher employee engagement levels more so than if you were to increase employee pay. So why this is so important is because we know that managing compensation spend is critical right now. So in other words, think about how you can give employees a submarine to help them to better understand how you administer pay. So how you might do that, you might put together a total rewards guidelines document that you post on your SharePoint or your intranet page that highlights how and why pay decisions are made the way they are. So for example, how do you manage promotion increases? Who's involved in that process? What guidelines do you have established to document that? Having those types of tools available, as well as just having conversations with employees to offer them an opportunity to vocalize any questions that they may have in regards to your total rewards program. These are going to be worthwhile investments as you're seeking to maximize employee engagement levels, which we are highlighting repeatedly throughout this presentation today as a critical strategy as you're trying to overcome HR challenges. Now, when you think about pay transparency, it's important to note that it's a spectrum. So on the far left-hand side of the spectrum is where employees only know what they get paid. On the far right-hand side of the spectrum is employees know everyone's pay. And according to our survey, in the current state and the desired state, few organizations want all employees to know what everyone is getting paid. In fact, in the current state, we see 3% of employers that are sharing that information, and the desired state, only 4%. And it makes sense, right? You need to have not only a culture that supports this, but also managers need to be effectively trained in having those conversations with employees. You also need a lot of tools. And in some regards, it may be easier to do this from the beginning within an organization than to adopt such a strategy later in life. But where employers currently sit is that in the current state, most of them identified that employees only know what they get paid, but they want to advance on the spectrum. In fact, they want employees to know their pay range and where their pay can go. They also want employees to know how and why the company makes pay decisions the way it does. So they want to progress toward the right side of the spectrum. Now, we recognize that pay transparency is a journey, and it's not going to happen overnight as you're working to get the training and tools and process and all of that important stuff in place to support further pay transparency. But I challenge you to think about what might a 1% progression on this pay transparency spectrum look like for your organization. So if you were to focus next year, for example, on communicating your total rewards philosophy with employees, that may be a way to progress on your spectrum. If you were to adopt total rewards statements, that may be another way to progress on the spectrum. I challenge you to think about adopting these 1% strategies just to help you to continue to make forward progress as we recognize that it's not something that happens overnight. The next strategy that we dove into is in regards to benefits evolution, and it certainly has been an evolution over the years. And some of the key themes that we're seeing are that successful organizations are helping employees to express themselves, expand and support their families, and uniquely fortify their lives. So let's talk about this a bit more. In our survey, I asked employers, how many of you are adding new benefits in 2020, or how many of you have added new benefits in 2019? And nearly 50% of employers we found are adding new benefits. This chart highlights the top new benefits that are being offered, and we'll talk about the key themes of these in the next few slides just to point out a few, we see paid volunteer time off being number 1, as well as relaxed dress code being number 2. These trends, again, will be available in the ebook following this session. An additional highlight that we uncovered is that on average, employers are seeing medical and health insurance cost increases of about 5% over a 12-month period across the survey respondents. Now, key theme number 1 is we are thinking about the benefits evolution, helping employees to express themselves and how they're doing it. Well, I mentioned the top 2 benefit trends that were added were paid volunteer time and relaxed dress code. And these benefits allow for greater self-expression, which increases employee engagement. So these are also strategies that you can consider if you have not already done so, as you're seeing or thinking about how can you increase employee engagement within your organization, which we continue to showcase as a worthwhile strategy to pursue. Additional themes of new benefits are that employers that are succeeding are helping employees to expand and support family. So 20% are adding paid paternity leave, 16% are adding paid maternity leave, 10% paid adoption, 5% paid foster child, and 1% adding paid caregiver leave. So caregiver leave includes all those parental leave items that we just mentioned in the first 4 bullets, but it also includes sibling leave, caring for aging parents, those types of leave programs. Again, you want to help employees to feel like they can succeed in work by bringing their whole self to work. And we recognize that in doing that, a lot of employees have families and important commitments outside of work, that there's more to them than just who they are while they're at work. And so employers that are succeeding are recognizing that, and they are providing these types of leave programs, be it parental or caregiver, to better support employees and their families. The third theme that we saw from a benefits evolution standpoint is that employers who are succeeding are helping employees uniquely fortify their lives. And some of the ways that they're doing that are through education reimbursement. So 14% of survey respondents are adding that. Pet insurance, 11% are adding that. Employee discounts, another 11%. And how you might obtain those employee discounts, for those of you who don't know, you can talk with your benefits brokerage firm to identify opportunities. But what you may not know is you can also just contact local employers directly. So for example, if there's something that you can offer in exchange to another employer in the area, so that, you know, if you have a service that you could offer at a discount and they have a service that they could offer at a discount, you can establish that type of discount that you can then offer to your respective employees within your organization. So think about how you might be able to establish those types of opportunities yourself. Additionally, 10% are adding identity theft protection, which we know is critical in this technological environment where identity theft is definitely something that needs to be considered. So what's important with all of this is thinking back to what we were talking about in terms of the inward assessment in regards to total rewards philosophy. And as you're thinking of how you can uniquely fortify the lives of your employees, what is it that motivates them, and what is it that's going to be of interest as you're considering what new benefits to offer within your organization. Another top strategy that was focused on is advancing diversity and inclusion so that you can bring perspective and warmth to your organization. What do we mean by diversity and inclusion? And if we were to take things one step further, what do we mean by equity as well? Well, diversity is recognizing and respecting the individual differences, both the visible as well as the invisible, that make each person unique. So diversity asks, who do we bring into our company? Equity is focused on creating equitable opportunities for all, regardless of varying dimensions of diversity. So equity asks, how do we ensure all candidates and employees have equal access to opportunity? And how you may consider doing that is, or evaluating equity, is looking at things like job description requirements as an example. Have we reevaluated the requirements for our positions to make sure that we're truly requiring just the things that are required for a job? So for example, if it does not require a college degree, let's not have that. Let's make sure that we are providing greater access and more equitable opportunities to all that we can. And then from an inclusion standpoint, that's focused on building an environment where everyone feels a sense of belonging and value. So inclusion asks, how do we make sure that the employees and candidates feel welcome within our organization? Now, of the survey respondents in our 2020 trend survey, 47% identified that diversity and inclusion is a strategic priority for their organizations. And I'd love to see that figure higher. And those companies that did identify it to be a strategic priority, they reported lower turnover, and they were 2.5 times more likely to have high employee engagement levels. If these two statistics alone aren't a business case for you as to why diversity and inclusion should be a strategic priority for your organizations, there's a lot of other research out there that further supports the benefits of diversity and inclusion. And we also know that there's a need for it. So of survey respondents, 26% identified that they have a diverse employee population, and only 15% identified that they have a diverse executive team. What this gap highlights between employee and executive is there's also opportunity for more equitable opportunity within organizations. And then we also saw, what are employers doing from an action standpoint to advance diversity and inclusion. Well, 22% of employers offer diversity and inclusion training. 17% set diversity and inclusion standards for vendors and partners. So as an example of what this might mean, Microsoft has made a big public statement to all of their vendors that they need to offer paid paternity leave if they want to continue as a vendor to Microsoft. So that's an example of a diversity and inclusion standard that an organization may set. And then we also saw that 7% of employers have a dedicated diversity and inclusion employee or committee. Here at QTI, we have a belonging, inclusion, and diversity committee that's made up of employees across the company to help us as we advance in our D&I journey. And I encourage you to think about establishing such a committee within your organizations if you haven't already. It's another way to not only help you advance in this important D&I initiative for your organizations, but it's also a way to increase employee engagement if you're able to have employees with a passion and an ability to champion this important priority for your organization. And then the final HR strategy that we dove into was driving development and engagement, because we believe that talent management that transforms your organization and your employees is only going to help you be more successful. From a talent development standpoint, we see that employers continue to invest, especially as the skills gap widens, in development opportunities. So 73% of respondents are investing in internal training. 64% are investing in external training, and 56% are investing in mentoring and coaching. Additionally, we saw that 53% are providing education assistance to employees. Now, what was interesting is that only 41% of employers that we surveyed are investing in supervisory or managerial training. And we know that managers can have be one of the biggest drivers of employee engagement, and so this proper training can have a huge impact. In fact, we know that managers who are disengaged are 3 times more likely to have disengaged employees as managers who are engaged. So managing that engagement level of managers and then properly training them is going to be another key way for you to manage and keep ahead of your employee engagement levels. We also learned from a performance management standpoint that 97% of employers have a performance management process. What was surprising to me, especially in recent years where there's been a lot of hype around abandoning the annual performance reviews, is that majority of employers are still doing formal reviews once a year or maybe twice per year. So that is still the norm. 26% of employers do formal frequent feedback on a monthly or quarterly basis, and 14% of employers do informal feedback, on-demand coaching in real time. Now, what we know is regardless of method, providing employees with performance feedback is critical in order to increase employee engagement levels and then course correct any performance management issues that may be occurring within your organization. And especially with the technology that we have today, there's a lot of vehicles that are out there to manage those types of conversations. There's something called the 15-5 that's out there, which is another way to think about having one-on-ones between managers and employees, whereby an employee invests about 15 minutes each week in updating a system on the tasks that they're working against, where projects are at, those types of things. The manager spends about 5 minutes each week reviewing that, commenting where appropriate, and then in those regular one-on-one meetings, employers or managers, are freed up to have more impactful conversations with employees related to how is performance going? Is the employee effectively achieving performance expectations, or are there things that can be considered to course correct? Exploring these types of on-demand tools that are out there that are going to help you to free up time so that you can have more meaningful performance conversations are a worthwhile thing to explore in this day and age. Then from a people analytics standpoint, we found that 30% of employers have increased the investment in people analytics in the past 12 months. And I'd speculate that if we were to look back further, we'd see even higher investment in people analytics. What do we mean by people analytics? Well, that's things like a talent dashboard, HR analytics employees, HRAS updates, people analytics training. So in other words, thinking about how you can analyze the people data within your organization to draw meaning and insights, and then driving decisions of the business based on these key insights. We expect that there's going to be more and more investment in people analytics in the coming years, especially as organizations are embracing the need for HR to be a strategic partner to succeed in this current environment. So, as you're thinking about taking these strategies back to prepare your 2020 HR strategy, what are the critical takeaways from our discussion today? The most important thing that I hope you take away from our conversation is around employee engagement, which should be a top priority if it's not already. And we encourage you to focus inwardly in order to then enhance external interest and maximize ROI. So what are some of the things that we saw associated with high employee engagement? Just as a reminder, we saw better company performance, lower payroll spend increases, lower voluntary employee turnover, and fewer HR challenges. For those of you on the phone in HR, I'm sure all of you would celebrate to have fewer HR challenges. I know a lot of us that would. We encourage you, as you're preparing your 2020 HR strategy, to ask yourself these questions of self-reflection, which hopefully all resonate based on the conversation we've had today. So what are the top HR challenges that you are facing this year? They may or may not be the same as what was uncovered in our HR Trends survey and report. When was the last time that you evaluated your employment brand? If you were to invest just a fraction of what you invest in managing your employer brand, in managing your employment brand, think about the positive returns that could be gained. Are your strategies effectively addressing employee retention? So think back to the stay interview conversation we had and how important it is to ask employees what it is that retains them before it's too late. How do you encourage employees to engage within your organization? We talked about a lot of strategies as it relates to employee engagement. What are some of the strategies that you might adopt? How do you communicate your company's total rewards philosophy to employees? First of all, do you have a documented total rewards philosophy? And then if so, are you sharing that with employees, and how are you continuing to bring that to life on a regular basis throughout your organization? How do you want to progress on the pay transparency spectrum? Again, thinking about how and why pay decisions are made. What might a 1% progress look like for you at your organization next year? How can you evolve your benefits to differentiate your company and align with employee motivators? Again, don't assume that you know what motivates employees. Ask them and then have the data inform your benefits strategy. Are you prioritizing and taking action to advance a diversity and inclusion strategy? And taking actions being a critical piece as you're thinking about how you are prioritizing that strategy. Lastly, are your talent management programs effectively advancing your employees and your company? So as you're thinking about talent development, are you investing in development for your employees? And I also encourage you to think about, talent development may not be investment in dollars necessarily so much as investment in time. So for example, are you able to connect your employees with development opportunities that may be outside of your organization, such as helping them to join the board of a nonprofit or volunteer through a nonprofit or provide membership through some type of association which may be free to that employee. Those types of development opportunities may not be investment faced by your organization in terms of dollars, so much as this time in connecting those dots or the employees with those organizations. From a performance management standpoint, it's thinking about having more meaningful discussions and providing that feedback on a regular basis with employees. And then people analytics, are you analyzing the data and driving decisions based on that? So all in all, are your talent management programs effectively advancing your employees and your company? Now, we, given that we were light on presenters, finished ahead of schedule today, and so I encourage you to use this time to reflect on your 2020 HR strategy and think through some of the questions that we talked today and how you might continue to advance as an organization. We hope that these insights have been helpful for you. If you would like a copy of the detailed survey findings, please consider participating in next year's survey. If you didn't participate in this year's survey, you need to be a participant in order to get the results for all the survey questions that were asked and the detailed findings. However, we, as mentioned earlier, have summarized all the key takeaways in the HR Trends report that we will be sharing in follow-up after this session. We'll also be sharing an electronic version of this presentation in case you would like a copy of these slides. But feel free to reach out if you have any questions to us at QTI. You can do so through email at qti@qtigroup.com. Otherwise, feel free to check out our website, and we'd be happy to follow up and answer any questions that you may have. Thank you again so much for your time and attention today. We hope that these strategies are helpful, and we wish you all the luck as you prepare your 2020 HR strategy. Thank you.